Most of the developing world is located in a strip of land that encircles the Earth at the equator. Throughout this tropical belt, the standard of living is low and the span of human life is short. Some of the most inhospitable climates of the world affect nations located within this belt of poverty, whether it be regions of Central and South America, Asia, or Africa. In these regions, people live under the constant threat of malnutrition and carry the burden of disease from their earliest childhood. For the Tuareg nomads who live along the Sahara Desert, the search for water is a way of life. In a cycle of 10 years or so, severe droughts strike many countries of sub-Saharan Africa, destroying crops and animals, converting productive land into desert, killing millions of people. Here in Mali, in Western Africa, the average life expectancy is 43 years old, as compared to 75 in the United States. It has been very dry this season, and hundreds of Tuareg families have moved out of the desert searching for water and pasture for their animals. This particular group, following Chief Sakiyu Ahmed Ali, have settled about 200 kilometers away from the Malian city of Mopti. The chief is worried, and with good reason. The lack of water is threatening the lives of his people. The water available around the camp is running out, and the main water hole is drying up. Illness is spreading. It has been a long trip and many are tired, but the chief insists they should continue their ride toward the city of Mopti. Mopti is located near the river Niger, and in the river valleys there is a better chance to survive. Rivers bring life to the Sahelian countries at the southern border of the Sahara Desert. The water helps people fulfill some of life's basic necessities: cooking, drinking, washing clothes, bathing children. Rivers are vital to the people who live in this dry land, where the desert is ever encroaching. Without the water of the rivers, there would be no food, no life. And to the fishermen of the region, like these members of the Boso tribe in Mali, the rivers also provide their daily sustenance. Along the river basins, the land is fertile, and people can cultivate the soil and raise livestock. The tragic paradox is that the rivers, the givers of life to the people of this region, can also be the carriers of suffering and death. There is a treacherous black fly near the rivers. The fly bites humans and deposits a parasite which causes onchocerciasis, a disease also known as river blindness. The disease is found in parts of Yemen and Central and South America, but is most prevalent in several countries of West Africa. The rivers so desperately needed by the people who live here also serve as breeding places to the black fly that transmits river blindness. The fly lays its eggs in the fast-running waters of the river, usually on leaves, branches, or rocks. It takes approximately 2.5 weeks for the fly to develop from egg to its adult stage. Small streams and canals can also serve as breeding places for the black fly. But river blindness is not the only disease particular to the tropical zones. Malaria, leprosy, sleeping sickness, tetanus, and schistosomiasis are also present. In the poorer nations, millions of children die before the age of 5 because of widespread disease. But the figures fail to convey the degree of misery that these illnesses inflict upon those who survive. In West Africa, for example, the consequences of river blindness are disastrous. In these regions, people are poor and the style of life is simple. In this village, near a breeding place for the fly, the disease has taken its toll on human life. Here, people are not only desperately poor, but are also cursed with river blindness. The young leave as soon as they can. Many of those who stay will eventually become blind. In villages like this, the pressures are immense. People who are healthy not only have to work for themselves and for their families, but must also provide for the blind.
Well, we estimate there are between 20 and 30 million cases of the disease, and most of those live in Africa, where the disease also tends to be more severe. And one of the main complications of onchocerciasis is blindness. And what is particular is that in those limited areas close to rivers where the disease is prevalent, blindness can reach rates something like 10 to 15% of the population being blind. Then one should also remember that onchocerciasis affects the whole body, and it's a debilitating disease in general.
These people were once productive members of their communities. Now they have become a burden to their village. Those who survive under the heavy burden of disease are condemned to living only marginally productive lives.
The amount of money available for research in tropical diseases in the third world is simply not enough. The technology exists. There are resources available. It's a question of directing these resources to meet these very basic human needs that exist in the developing world. If we were able to continually energize the technology that exists, along with very minimal increased financial resources, tremendous results can be achieved in terms of eradicating many of the tropical diseases that are rampant today, that afflict millions of people, that need not exist.
It is hard for Chief Gabra Sabre to understand how a small black fly could take away his eyesight and that of 25 more people in his village of 200. This farmer lost his eyesight 3 years ago. His wife and 3 of his 4 children are either blind or suffering from other tropical diseases. Only one son is well, age 11. He does the planting, the harvesting, and carries the water from the river. But the nodules on his back reveal that he also has river blindness. In time, he too will be blind.
When this fly bites people, it transmits a worm, which we call the Onchocerca volvulus. And this worm is the smaller one. This smaller worm, or the microfilarium, moves in the soft tissues of the human body. And it keeps moving, wandering around until it grows and becomes the adult. And you can get one male, one female, always in a nodule, mating together to produce many of the infant worms. And it's usually these infant worms which cause the trouble. They wander around the eye, produce certain changes, and cause the blindness.
In the worst stricken areas, people can be exposed to over 1,000 bites per day. The infection provokes a tremendous itching sensation, and many people have committed suicide because of the itching. It also causes changes in the skin of the victims. One of these skin conditions is known as elephant skin or presbyodermia. The skin takes an appearance similar to that of an elephant or becomes paper thin as in old age. But blindness remains the most destructive effect of the disease. In some villages, as many as 20% of the inhabitants are totally blind. Many are men in their 30s and 40s, their most productive years. For countries that are already impoverished, the effect of tropical diseases, like river blindness, is devastating on their economies. Disease is not just a public hazard, but is also a major obstacle to economic development. As disease incapacitates people, the workforce is depleted and productivity diminishes in every sector of the economy.
In some cases, the effect is not so clear and it's not so easy to measure. But in the case of a disease like river blindness, for example, where you have such a high proportion of the population blinded, there are people who are consuming and contributing relatively little to the economy. And their care, of course, is quite a drain. Furthermore, the areas that were very severely affected were virtually abandoned. Fertile land which was not being tilled because the flies drove the people away.
The people who lived in this village were forced to move away from their homes into barren lands where their chances of survival are minimal. The fact is that we don't know enough about how to control or cure many of these tropical diseases. More research is needed. But most of the resources directed to improve health have gone to diseases that affect the temperate zones of the world, where the industrialized countries are located. In the case of river blindness, an international campaign was started and a program to control the disease was launched about 10 years ago. The World Health Organization, located here in Geneva, is the executing agency for the program. The Onchocerciasis Control Program is an international effort to help 15 million West Africans affected by river blindness. The program's aim is to free 7 West African countries of the disease and to restore large areas of land to productive use.
For long-term accumulation, nor are they hazardous for fish in the appendix in which...
Headquarters of the campaign are in West Africa, in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso.
Certainly, clearing one disease doesn't mean automatically the people will be healthy. They have other diseases. We hope, with the experience we gain in this disease, we shall be able to accelerate the battle against other diseases like malaria, trypanosomiasis, bilharzia, and so on. That needs a lot of hard work, but it's hopeful.
The program covers an area larger than France or the state of Texas. At this time, the best means to control the disease is to break its transmission by destroying the black fly. This is done by applying insecticides to the breeding places in the fast-flowing sections of the rivers. Great care is taken in applying the right quantity of insecticide. Underspraying could increase resistance of the larvae to the insecticide, and overspraying could upset the ecological balance of the region. If signs of resistance to an insecticide are noticed, another type must be used.
Well, the next step has already been taken in planning for an extension which is going to be implemented now, covering another 4 countries. And I would hope that in the future it's possible to extend these control schemes further into the Central Africa and East African countries that have onchocerciasis also.
Research on the dispersion of the fly is also important. The black fly is capable of traveling long distances, up to several hundred miles, and the likelihood of transmitting the disease to humans as it moves is great. This type of research helps determine the size of the control area and prevents reinvasion of the fly to areas that are already free of the disease, and there has been success.
The situation is very good now. We have 85% of the onco area under control. Of course, we have our ups and downs. Like all battles, we lose a few wars and win many more, but the net result is very hopeful indeed.
And in these countries, hope means development. River blindness continues to be a constant threat to the people of West Africa. But in the areas where the disease has been controlled and where the black fly is no longer in command, agriculture flourishes again. For countries where 70 to 90% of the population makes its living from the land, this is a major economic breakthrough.
Perhaps one of the most notable achievements is that 3 million children born since the beginning of the program are totally freed from river blindness.
ربنا ما خلقت هذا ما خلقت هذا بادلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار ربنا إنك من تدخل النار.
But river blindness has not disappeared, and there is much to be done. There is no reliable drug to treat onchocerciasis. 2 drugs exist at present, but they have unacceptable side effects. A new drug must be found.
But the problem is that many of the methods we have are not good enough to make a real big change for some of them. For example, in the case of onchocerciasis, river blindness, it has been possible to control the flies by using insecticides in rivers and so on, and that has brought about some improvement. But if we could find a drug that would kill the worms, then the control would be so much better. The same is true of malaria. We've been controlling it with certain drugs like chloroquine and certain insecticides like DDT. But chloroquine is beginning to lose its effect now that some of the parasites have become resistant, and many of the mosquitoes have become resistant to DDT. So we need new tools which are more powerful, much cheaper and much easier to apply, and perhaps that are not so damaging to the environment.
Throughout the tropical zones, whether it's Asia, Africa, or South America, high rates of disease are not only common to the impoverished rural areas. Disease plagues the urban poor as well. In the poorer sections of the cities, health conditions are sometimes worse than in the countryside. Infectious diseases claim millions of lives from the poor neighborhoods every year. Contaminated water supplies, lack of sanitation and appropriate waste disposal make diarrheal diseases one of the worst health problems in the slums. Overcrowding and poor housing facilities add to the problems. Children are forced to play in the raw filth of the cities. Malnutrition is rampant, and in some communities, 1 child out of every 4 never reaches his 5th birthday. Trash is thrown everywhere, increasing the chances for disease to spread.
I think that the world economy, as I understand it, is so closely interlocked. If the people of a developing country become healthier and they produce more and earn more, they will consume more. And who is producing those things they're going to consume? A lot of it is going to come from the more developed countries. So that there are, in fact, built-in self-serving and, in a good sense, in a positive sense, ideas in terms of giving help and support to health in developing countries. Let us also face the fact that we're living in one world today. People are moving around for business, as tourists, and all the rest of it, and they are quite often exposed to some of these dangers. So that's another advantage to the developed countries.
The fact that not enough resources are being allocated for research for diseases, for tropical diseases in developing countries is largely a question, I think, of education. I think people in countries like the United States can't easily relate to problems that exist in developing worlds. And nobody in our country, for example, suffers from onchocerciasis. And yet our grandmothers and our fathers are having strokes and heart attacks, and unfortunately, and others in our families have had cancer. These are diseases that we can readily relate to, and this is the reason without a doubt, that major investments in these types of diseases are being made, and they should be made. It's not to say it's a question of either or. It's a question, however, of education, and a question that relates to the fact of understanding that with just a little more, we can achieve tremendous results in tropical diseases that afflict millions of people that it need not be.
In recent decades, living conditions have improved remarkably for some of the inhabitants of our planet. The advancements in the field of health may be considered among the major accomplishments of the 20th century. But despite these achievements, millions of people in the tropical regions of the world suffer from debilitating diseases. In many cases, the eradication or control of these diseases can be secured at low cost. The tragedy is that although the costs are relatively small, the money needed is not available.